Partnership's just not about making money. It's about growing together. We'll help you scale. You help us scale. That's what I learned at Microsoft is build together. Don't just be transactional.
I want to take you back to your time at Microsoft because you oversaw this incredible shift that resulted in growing from 600 million to 5 billion in 6 years.
It was a big jump for me.
What was it like working directly under Satya?
I'm going to just be completely blunt. I love the guy. My biggest regret leaving the company, honestly, Scott, was leaving from that kind of leadership that sets the tone. We have a strong belief that you can't grow if you're shrinking. The revenue leader needs to have an overwhelming amount of focus on retention, clarity, empowerment, and accountability can drive very good things.
Behind the scenes, it was a small group of people that were doing everything.
Welcome back to the GTM podcast. It's your host, Scott Barker.
I want to know how this insane growth actually happened.
Hello and welcome back to the GTM podcast. Appreciate y'all hanging out with us for the next hour. I've got a fantastic guest lined up today. Super excited for this one. I am joined by Hayden Stafford. Hayden, welcome.
Thank you, Scott. Delighted to be here. Fresh off the heels of our SKO, which concluded yesterday down in Dallas. Glad to be here.
Hell yeah. Yeah, you've been a busy man. You went through QBR season, and then you've got, board meetings happening, just had your SKO. Appreciate you taking the hour amongst all the crazy travels.
My pleasure, man. Yeah, 3 weeks of going, days full. Now it's time to get back to the real job.
Yeah, I love it. How did the SKO go? You left feeling energized? People pumped?
Yeah. Oh, it was incredible. It was, last year we took a little pause and did it virtually. First virtual one in since COVID, and it just doesn't pass. It doesn't get the energy up. We were down in Dallas, and it was Dallas, Texas, Western theme, Cowboys. So it was a little over the top with the Cowboy stuff. It's great getting us together. All centering on the core priorities and also having fun together. I loved it.
Yeah, I feel like SKOs are one of those things that it's just impossible to duplicate in the digital environment. It
doesn't work.
It's asking a lot of people, right? You're like, hey, we've got usually like 8 hours of content, things to consume, things to digest. We want to collaborate, and you're sitting in your home office or remote, and it's just tough to stay engaged in a digital format.
You have distractions. You might be multitasking. The other thing is just the moments when you're not in the class and seeing the services team hanging out with the sales team, the products folks hanging out with the CS folks. Those bond bridges that become very vital in day-to-day work. So, yeah, totally. They have to be in person.
Agreed. I often say it, but I think I learned everything throughout my career, not in like the actual training and enablement that the companies I was a part of set me up with, but I learned from just watching and like osmosis and those little like interactions that you see and hear, and those little anecdotes are so important.
Totally.
But super quickly, I always love to give the listeners a quick bio. So Hayden Stafford is currently the president and chief revenue officer at Seismic. I'm sure many, many folks listening to this are either Seismic customers or very well aware of Seismic. We've been huge fans and partners back in the outreach days, and I'm a big fan. And you oversee all global go-to-market. So that includes pre-sales, sales, customer success, services, partners, basically everything there. And you've had a hell of a career, over the last 20 plus years, worked at the helm of really what I would consider the world's leading technology brands. So prior to joining Seismic, served as the president of global field operations at Pegasystems. Before that was the corporate vice president at Microsoft, leading global business applications, specifically around Microsoft Dynamics 365. Spent 6 years there, I believe it was. And then prior to Microsoft, spent a stint as a SVP at Salesforce, and then a decade at IBM, eventually departing as the VP and managing director on Wall Street. So, man, we've got the right guy to talk through all things go to market. That's for sure. And I guess we'll just get right into it. Like, there's so many angles that I think we could take this conversation, but we've been able to have a few conversations, and one of the things that really stuck out to me in our conversations was your experience expanding from like an SMB mid-market motion to the enterprise. And I want to take you back to your time at Microsoft, because you oversaw this incredible shift that resulted in growing from 600 million to 5 billion in 6 years. And I want to say that one more time for the listeners, growing from 600 million to 5 billion in 6 years, which is insane. And that also equated to a shift from 85% of your customers being SMB and mid-market to, at the end of that 6 years, it was 75% enterprise. I mean, that's incredible. Walk me through that time period, set the stage a little bit of when you were tasked with this big leading the charge at Microsoft.
Yeah, it's you encapsulated it pretty well. I think it was closer to 750-ish million, but who's counting 100 million or so?
A couple million here, a couple hundred million here or there, dropping the
certainly
bucket.
A rounding error all at Microsoft. So I was at Salesforce, and I got a call for an opportunity to move from Salesforce to Microsoft. And, Microsoft Dynamics was a distant third, fourth, fifth. And I wasn't particularly interested. But when I had the chance to meet Satya and other folks, and he was just beginning his CEO career at Microsoft, I heard what the plan was. The goal was to bring all of those assets of Azure, Modern Workplace, the business application side together, build a really powerful data set, all within that common data platform on Azure. And made the jump. And it was just coming out of the doldrum years under Ballmer. The stock hadn't moved much. Microsoft was really seen as kind of yesterday's technology company. So it was a big jump for me. But it was the people I met and Satya's vision that got me. The company was very SMB mid-market. Dynamics had bought a company called Great Plains, which is like an ERP business. Big politician now that everyone probably knows was the founder of it. And we bought that company, and we also bought another small company out of Europe for ERP. And it was almost all channel. In fact, probably safe to say 90% through channel. And the Microsoft sellers, they were really there for connecting, helping with the paperwork, how to process things through the complicated backend in Microsoft. And it was low-end ERP and low-end CRM on-premise too. That's the other thing, Scott. It was, I think, 100% on-premise when I joined there. And if not, it was a small fraction of cloud. And I was brought in to lead when I first joined, it was to lead the enterprise part of Dynamics, which there was none. And we set out on that journey to do exactly what you said, which was to get more balance between enterprise and kind of down market, get more direct sales, and become far more important to the core strategy of Microsoft. And 6.5 years later, that happened. So that's the backdrop. Yeah. That's the backdrop of what happened.
Cool. I got to ask, what was it like working directly under Satya? Like, you could make a strong argument that he's one of the greatest, turnaround CEOs of our generation. Was it obvious from the get-go that, hey, this guy's just special, he has a vision? I would love to hear some of your interactions with him.
Thanks for asking that question. Didn't know you were going to ask that, but I'm going to just be completely blunt. I love the guy. When I met him, everything you hear about him, read about him, what you think, it's true. Had a lot of interactions. He was brand new. He was a brand new CEO. Little known fact, he actually had run Dynamics. So he had a real tight, sweet spot soft spot in his heart for business applications. I worked for Judson Althoff, who reported to Satya, had a lot of exposure to the board, even with Bill Gates and others. Super humble, really inquisitive, technically deep, but also business deep. And just you're a little thrown off balance by him because of his skill set, his acumen, but also he can disarm you quite well to get the most out of you. He's a wonderful leader. My biggest regret leaving the company, honestly, Scott, was leaving from, that kind of leadership that sets the tone. And remember, it was a very siloed organization that competed against one another, stack ranking in terms of performance management and assessment. And he changed it into one Microsoft, teaming across solution areas and getting the most out of the team. And look what's happened. So yeah, it was a great experience. And what he said back then about his plans for Dynamics played out perfectly. It's the tip of the spear. It has the customer data, the interaction data that can feed the back end system. Back then it was ML, machine learning, and rudimentary AI to then be able to extend extensibility that you can bring to other apps. And with the advent of Power Apps and other low code apps to pull off that common data platform, it's exactly where they're at right now.
What was, I guess, your biggest learning about leadership watching Satya do his thing?
The culture was, I don't want to belittle the old Microsoft, but it was kind of toxic. And then if you look at the stock, it was stagnant for 10 years. Mm-hmm. And look at it since then. When I joined, I think it was at $31 a share, and it had been there for a decade. It was a lost decade in terms of equity value, the return for shareholders. And what he did was he brought energy through a vision, consistently communicated it. It's really where I learned the idea that clarity, empowerment, and accountability can drive very good things. Good communicator, focused on the teams coming together, 1 + 1 is 3, and not taking, the old way, not allowing that to get in the way. He broke down walls. He demanded more of people. He listened. That was another big thing, a lot of listening. I went to his leadership team meetings. They were every Friday. He did his leadership team meetings. So he and his direct reports, every week, every Friday for, I think it was 6 hours, 7 hours. And they'd bring in different parts of the business for updates. And it was about listening. It wasn't to beat you up. It wasn't to do an inspection, though there was some inspection. It was to listen and learn about the business. And I think that was the big piece, Scott, was that for sure.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so you joined Microsoft, you're bought into this vision, but now you're faced with a pretty big task, and you're going to build out this enterprise motion that doesn't really exist or exists on a smaller scale. There's no proven playbook. You don't have a ton of customers you can point to yet, and I think a lot of our listeners can probably relate to that. They might be in the same thing, where we got to move up market. Our board says we have to move up market. So we're going to go hire this enterprise person that's going to solve all our problems. What was like step 1, 2, and 3 when you just get into the organization and you have this monumental task ahead of you?
Step 1 was take a little bit more control with the partners. It was, as I said earlier, an extremely partner-led business. And I love working with partners. They're integral to the company, but they can't run the business. They were the interface to customers. Microsoft sellers, and they're some of the best in the world. Many of them are still there. Others have moved on to great things. They were a little bit more in the back office. They were a little bit more kind of on the transactional processing side. It was get more in the front with them as the face of Microsoft Dynamics. and having a point of view about Dynamics plus the other Microsoft products. So the one Microsoft from Satya, what can that do for you? You know, Dynamics on Azure with integration with Office or Modern Workplace, and being able to do CRM things within your Outlook or vice versa. That was the first piece, because most of our partners, they were partners that just did ERP. They did Great Plains or NAV. It was let's sell the holistic story. Then it was also demand more of our products, voice of customer, voice of field, and bringing that feedback back into the product team. Because remember, partners, they just love to do the implementations and get more hours for bespoke coding and one-off development. And we were like, no, let's get the engineering and product teams involved, get that voice of all the gaps, the things that they were building one-off with the customers through the partners, and get it built into the product. So the second piece to that, Scott, was really tight partnership with the product team. I'd consider the product leader, his name was James Phillips, a huge partner of mine, deeply involved with customers and partners. And he became kind of an extension of the sales team. The third piece was tight alignment with marketing. We had to cast a new message. We had to drive new positioning. At the time, the head of marketing was Alyssa Taylor. And she, myself, and James came together and really started to put the engine behind this shift of listening to customers, improving the product, and working with partners to get a more holistic solution. So that's where we started. Can't do it alone. At a company that size, or even in a small company, you can't do it alone. The different parts of the organization have to act as one.
Yeah. I'm hearing like you almost went in and sold the partners first, like before going to the customers. Like, we need to get the partners on board with this new vision, and then we need to go and get fully aligned with product, and then we need to make sure that we're in lockstep with marketing, so we can showcase this new vision both to customers and to partners.
And analysts, who influence the buying process, them as well. And we did that, together with marketing and product. One last thing we also did was we started playing with pricing and the incentives that we did with partners. There was just so much money going to the partners because they would source and close the lion's share of opportunities. And we started to change some of those incentives and put the money back into hiring direct sellers. So we started building our direct field force. And over those years, Scott, it grew and grew and grew. And then we could do segmentation. And the first 2 years, so like 2014 to 16, was all those mechanics, all those foundational things.
When did you coach your sellers to, I guess, like insert themselves into a channel or partner-led deal? Would you try and get in as early as possible? Was it different for different partners, or how would you think about that relationship?
I think that's a great question. I think about that the same way I think about, like right now at my company, Seismic. Traditionally, sellers will sell and then they'll hand it to services, be it a partner or your own internal services, and then they hand it to the CSMs. That is a lot of handoffs, kind of the telephone game, right? The story starts to change. When you're working with partners, you want to be in as early as possible so that you can shape the narrative. And, the best sellers do a lot of active listening, do a lot of consultative selling. Part of my career that you didn't cover up front was I started 6 years at Ernst & Young as a consultant. And instead of going in with, I've got a hammer for your nail, instead, we're going to go and build this thing with our hands from the grounds up. We're going to shape the solution together, focus on the outcomes, the value you're going to get out of it. Because through the channel, nothing against them, but they were very product driven. The concept of solution, no, because they weren't incentivized, they weren't paid, and they didn't have knowledge of the rest of the Microsoft products. Most of them were very specific, either ERP or CRM partners. So the broadness of their view, we had to change that. And if you go look at some of the partners right now in the channel, Most of them started as single product, one trick ponies. All of them now do all of the CRM capabilities, sales, service, marketing. They do most all of the ERP, and now most of them are doing other solution areas. So for me, it was getting in super early. So there aren't handoffs where things can go wrong. It's just the same as if you're not using partners and you're doing it internally within your own organization. Bring the teams together early.
Yeah. Yeah. What in those days made, and there might be some timeless learnings here, but like what made a good channel partner? I think part of the struggle with channel or partnerships is, you can go out and sign all these net new great partners and it looks like there's forward momentum, but sometimes the vast majority is driven by, let's say, the top 20%, and you need to be spending the bulk of your time with them, enabling them, making sure they're successful, and not getting caught in this wheel of just like signing new partners and then never actually seeing that turn into revenue.
You said an important word, and it's kind of why I came to Seismic. But a lot of people sign partners, and they get them on the system, they bring them into whatever tiering or program. Very little time spent on enabling them, like bringing them through the culture, like not only the product capabilities, but what you're trying to do as a business. What are the best practices in a delivery methodology that you want? If you want a methodology that is steeped in business outcomes, it needs to start during the implementation. And if they're not skilled in it, it's not going to happen. So enabling them. The other big thing was extreme expertise. We went after partners that weren't generalists. If we're going to use partners for part of our channel, which we did, early on, we needed to pick partners that were experts in retail, as an example, for some of our ERP stuff. And we could train them and coach them on the nuances of the product and the solution set. So that was really important. It was their domain expertise, extreme expertise. It was enabling them on what we wanted. And then the last thing was we put time into the partnership. Partnership's just not about making money. It's about growing together. We'll help you scale. You help us scale. So a lot of focus on mutual development and mutual success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. The next question I had was, you've obviously seen tremendous success recently in the role at Seismic. And I think you've seen a similar shift that you saw at Microsoft from, SMB mid-market to being able to, really enable big enterprise growth. I think I saw you have, 85 customers now that are above $1 million ARR, which is incredible.
Pretty incredible for a company our size. Yeah, it's a lot.
It is. And it's a really healthy sign. What parts of kind of the Microsoft playbook have you taken into your role at Seismic? Do channels and partners still play a big role in your success at Seismic?
Huge. We've always understood partners here and that they're important. I don't think we really ever understood how they're important. To get a partner to work with you, you've got to do things that make them successful. It can't be just about making us successful. So we really started to shift to, for instance, Microsoft. They're a great partner of ours. We work with them. The way they measure their success is Azure and how much consumption you're driving there and transacting through their marketplaces. If it's just working together, we do a deal and that doesn't do anything for them. But when you're running it through a financial mechanism such as their marketplace, they're able to recognize the benefit that drives their business. So understanding the benefit to both sides and making sure both sides are getting mutual lift. The second piece was developing with your partners. If you're just transactional deal-making, co-selling partners, again, everybody has those. But when you can start doing development together, you're starting to build product that drives their product and drives our product. Amazing things happen. As a matter of fact, not to do a plug, Scott, Salesforce has always been a good co-selling partner, and they realize benefit from us through royalty fees and whatnot. But when we started to develop product together around their agent force, as an example, which they just launched back at Dreamforce, where the product teams work together, built use cases within workflows that sellers use, There was just a press release last night or the night before, March 5th or 6th, of what we're doing with them. And there are just really natural workflows within Salesforce that calls into Seismic and brings real-time answers, real-time insights for sellers, sales managers, CROs, executive leaders, and the enablement and ops team. I mean, how about that? You're working in your partners in their application, providing multi-persona use cases, driving consumption there, and doing the same within our product. That's what I learned at Microsoft, is build together. Don't just be transactional development. Implementation partners or co-sell. So multifaceted relationships with partners has to be a mindset for any revenue leader, SMB, mid-market, or enterprise.
I think something you said there that stuck out was this idea that you're now working with, Salesforce, and recently it's kind of taken off. And I think part of the reason for that, and I think the best partners align themselves with the other partners like number one initiative. And if you look at Salesforce right now and what they're pushing in their marketing, it's like agent force, agent force, agent force. And I look at it similar to like your career. If you go into an organization, you want to be tied to the number one objective of that organization. And that's how you're going to grow your career. Similar with partnerships. If you understand deeply what all of their resources, time, and energy are going and the outcomes they're trying to drive, and you can be that kind of linchpin, that's when they're going to stand up and really take notice.
You are, we can take that away from partners and move it to just selling, whatever anyone's selling. If you're not aligned to an outcome that board is measuring that outcome, that customer on, or what that CEO is compensated on, or what the CRO is metriced on, if your products cannot tie to a lift, whether it's operational improvement, financial improvement, growth, cost takeout, tied to the outcomes, you're going to have a real hard time selling that, particularly in a tight macro environment like this. So I think you just did a natural bridge of what's important with partnerships, but also what's important in sales. Now, that may seem obvious, but one of the things I think Seismic did not do as well a few years ago was, I'm going to sell you this solution, and I'm going to measure the impact that it's having on the growth agenda that the leadership team has. So if I'm selling it to you and your biggest focus is new customer acquisition, or positioning our solution better address new customer acquisition, or else you won't get that wallet share.
Totally. Yeah. If you don't tie yourself to that, you go into what I call the nice to have graveyard, which is a scary place to be that a lot of folks are sitting in right now. So one of the other things that I've always really respected about Seismic, and I think it's one of the secret sauce of your growth, and I would love your view on this because I'm just an outsider and a fan, but you've done a really fantastic job kind of verticalizing your go-to-market approach. Like I remember, back in the outreach days when we would partner on deals, like you were in every financial services deal that was out there. We didn't do well in that, but you had cracked this code in these kind of almost unsexy verticals that a lot of, software companies struggled to do. And my understanding is that was pretty intentional. And you built totally different systems, processes, even teams to go and gain expertise, trust in these verticals. How do you think about that? How has that evolved? And is that a fair statement?
Thank you for asking and kind of giving me a chance to be proud and brag a little bit about the company, but you're spot on. We didn't start in a sexy space, investment banks, big retail banks, corporate banking. It was asset management. Our founder, Doug Winter, and some of his partners saw a problem around automation of fact sheets and pitch decks. So like when a team would come and try and sell you something, it's all the facts about that asset, who they are, what they do, or an investment banker around, selling you a pitch on taking you public or whatever. And it was getting all those documents compliant, accurate, and done quickly in an automated fashion. And in doing so and focusing on that industry and what's important to them, and for them, it was compliant speed with their kind of sales collateral. We took the asset management space. Today, 42% of our business is banking. Our anchor is asset management, but that moved into corporate banking, business banking, investment banking. Now, 9 of the top banks in the world are very material customer of ours. 24 of the top 25 asset managers are material customers of ours. 8 of the top 10 wealth management companies are customers of ours. We have nearly 500 financial services companies globally. That powers our business. It's may not be sexy. It's very hard to get into, but it's driving real value because we focus on the things that are most important to them: risk and compliance, and being a partner that can meet those needs. From there, Scott, we moved into other areas. We moved into technology and manufacturing. And today we did a press release earlier this week around some of the momentum we have, but really good strength in the technology industry, manufacturing, and as I said, banking. And we built different teams for these different industries, and it allowed us to go deep. Remember earlier I talked about extreme expertise? We kind of built our go-to-market teams that way too.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's something that more, even smaller, startup companies should really think about. You certainly have to get to a certain scale to start parsing out your teams, but people now more than ever, they really want to talk to experts. I think over the last 8 years, we all got obsessed with just running the same old motion, and you had an AE that's selling into all these different things, and it's really hard to be an expert. You can be a product expert, but you can't be an industry expert. And I think as kind of tech moats are disappearing a little bit, they want that expert who is going to be a true consultant in their business. And I think if you don't verticalize teams, it can be tough to do that.
You're absolutely right. A lot of people think with banks, right? It's, I'm going to make you big money, or I'm going to save you big money. That's the common sales pitch. We're going to have an impact on the top or the bottom line. You walk into Wells Fargo right now, your number one pitch is to be around risk and compliance, keeping them out of SEC jail, right? All of these banks think that way. So knowing those nuances of what those regulations are that sit on these banks, or life sciences or public sector, I think verticalization is coming back in vogue. And if you look at kind of what adds to the multiples of your valuation, in fact, at our SKO, we just had a pretty amazing session from a Goldman Sachs banker that covers the software space. And he was talking about valuations, multiples of valuations. And the vertical nature is becoming more and more of a driver of attractive companies from a valuation standpoint. And I buy into it. When you can own an industry, it's pretty hard for competitors to get in. So we're in a very good spot where we are with FS. Our competitors mostly aren't there. So I advise any company that's getting going to think about how they can really provide something to one industry and be truly differentiated, and then grow from there. That's what we did. We started in banking. We just, during my SKO, I talked about 10 years ago, 70, 80, 90% of our revenue came from banking. Now it's, as I said, about 40. Mm-hmm. It's gone down because we've moved into other areas. So that's a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, from a venture standpoint, and where I'm spending a lot of our time at GTM Fund is exactly that, in people that are building hyper specific, usually AI applications for kind of a forgotten about huge part of the economy. And there's just so much opportunity. And I think if you're a founder listening to this, like, I think when Seismic started, and you almost like intentionally choose a really hard part of the economy that has all this compliance and risk, and you go, and if you can nail that, well, the other ones become pretty easy. So pick, like, everyone wants to pick the low hanging fruit, but sometimes, battling it out in these certain parts of the economy that are not as competitive, if you can win it, it'll pay dividends for years and years.
100%. I agree.
Well, that's a pretty a good natural segue. We're talking about banks and financial institutions, and I know you have this pretty incredible story, which I would love for you to share with the audience, where you close nearly $1 billion deal. This is when you're at IBM, and it's with Merrill Lynch. And I won't steal the punchline, but it happens to be during a pretty dicey time period. Why don't you walk us through what was going on at that time?
I feel like I'm showing off here a little bit, flexing, but I think there's some really great lessons out of it. And whether you're selling $1 billion or you're selling 100,000, it's equally applicable. You're absolutely right. I remember the day clearly. It was September 14th. It was around 6 p.m. And I was at a Cleveland Browns versus Steelers game, and my phone started blowing up. And just bing, bing, bing. And I believe it was a BlackBerry back then. That's how dated this is. That was when the financial crisis hit. All the banks were collapsing. Merrill Lynch went under and went to Bank of America. Lehman went under, AIG, etc. Rewind a little bit. For the prior year and a half, our tech services consulting group at IBM was structuring a major outsourcing contract with Merrill. And it was to outsource all their back office operations, everything from server management, network, desk side support, the actual desk side itself, the phone and everything. And it was around $1 billion. And we were closing that deal on that Monday, the 15th.
Oh my God.
Monday, the 15th. The CFO, Mark Lockridge, was our sponsor. Just quick helicopter flight down from Armonk. He was going to fly down, and we were going to sign the deal at the end of the day, Monday, the 15th. And here I'm finding out that Merrill Lynch no longer exists as a company on Sunday at 6 o'clock. My heart sank. I felt sick to my stomach. The team was freaking out. And we thought we lost it. It was gone. 3 weeks, 4 weeks later, it was about a month later, we signed the deal. It was not $1 billion. It was, I think, 680, $608 million. And it, because we shrunk a little bit of the size, they de-scoped it, but we ended up signing it. I mean, you want to talk about any reason to back out of a contract. The reason why it happened, two things. I talked earlier about selling the outcome, the vision. The business case was so strong. It was so airtight. It was built by the customer with us. So we both played a part in the business case. Number two, our relationships were with the head of Merrill Lynch, the CIO. We had covered the CEO, Sam Palmisano, and their CEO had connected. And we had ubiquitous support. What we didn't know at the time when Merrill was kind of going under was it was a major strategic asset for Bank of America. It was going to become a key part of their business as it is now. And when we brought them in, they were so pleased with the business case. The leaders were saying, this is something we need. De-scoped a little bit, but it was still a pretty good deal and something I very much still remember today. So the lesson is multi-level selling, engagement with all the key decision makers, stakeholders, and influencers, not just the person who owns back office support for that one division, and a bulletproof business case, a value prop, whatever the case may be, TCO. But I think TCO is underselling it. Build that, but don't build it on your own. Build it with your customer, with their data, as well as your own data, your benchmarking data. And we got it done, buddy. It was awesome.
Kind of incredible story.
Thing.
I bet that football game wasn't quite as enjoyable as you had hoped after that phone call. Did you make it to the end of the game?
I made it to the end of the game. I was in the concourse a lot, but back then the Browns weren't so good. I'm a Cleveland Browns fan. Yeah,
I'm a Steelers fan. Good. Weirdly enough, a Canadian Steelers fan makes no sense.
Really?
Yeah. My dad was a Steelers fan, so I just grew up and adopted it because we don't have and a NFL team. So became a Pittsburgh Steelers fan.
Oh,
Strangely
that's
enough.
awesome. Well, we'll have to have a conversation over that later. What I
Yeah.
do remember is I lost the deal, at least on that day, and the Browns lost the game. So it was a
Double
double
whammy.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Did you, because sometimes in these like crisis situations, and this is like one of the bigger ones I've ever heard, is did you have to go, was there all of a sudden a bunch of different stakeholders that you had to like resell this vision to? Did they bring in like Bank of America execs, and like, did you have to kind of like resell this business case all over again?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
We did. It was kind of a distressed asset, of course, and that's why the bank was buying it. The good news was that account team, so the account team on Bank of America, what did they have? Great relationships across the board. And relationships aren't built just around a deal or a crit sit or an escalation. Great relationships are built where you know what their kids did last weekend and they want to go out for a dinner. And, there's just, so those great relationships and the ones we had, it was a great marriage together because we were able to get to the core of a big need at a time when they were more focused on the integration than anything else. And that was our biggie. We were like, you're integrating, you're not thinking about how to drive efficiency over here. Let us take that and keep working on the integration. And because of those relationships and that compelling case, we got it done.
Yeah, I love it. It's almost full circle. You again, even in that time of crisis, were able to align with the huge objective, which was this integration between the two organizations. And you were able to tweak kind of the value you provided and tie it to that.
Funny how these things keep repeating themselves, right?
Yeah.
Either very lucky or very intentful.
Yeah, totally. I love it. Well, man, thank you for sharing this, that story. And this is awesome. I could probably pick your brain for a couple more hours, but I just have two final questions, and they are intentionally vague, so you can take them anywhere you want. First question is, what is one widely held belief that revenue leaders believe to be true today that you think is bullshit or no longer serving us?
I'll tell you what it is. I feel pretty strongly about it. In fact, it's one of our priorities at Seismic that we had plastered all over the all of our PowerPoint slides at SKO this week. You typically think of growth. Sellers, take the hill, charge, win. We have a strong belief that you can't grow if you're shrinking. And it is my belief that the revenue leader needs to have an overwhelming amount of focus on retention, and not just sales and growth. So that means a very strong foundation, not only the team, but incentives, messaging that's tied around retention. Yeah. So therefore, the kind of the bullshit thing is that sellers only sell. I don't believe that. I think you do have CSMs. You do have a strong services team, and the really good sellers will stay committed and be involved long after the deal is signed. But if you can build some stuff into your sales plan, which we have done, where there is incentive for them to ensure that what they sell retains and grows, it's a very good thing. It makes the seller's job easier. It makes the company's ability to grow easier. So that is my point, is sellers don't just sell. Everybody owns retention in the company, including your sales team. Second piece to that, I think that might be bullshit, is I've heard a lot of people say selling is equal parts art and science. The art is the relationship building, the be approachable, be there for your customer, check in with them, ask how things are going. Absolutely critical. Customers always buy based on people, number one. But I think that piece is actually quite small in terms of the outcome of the success. Science, the science of selling is incredibly important. So if I were to give any advice to someone starting a company or looking to enter new markets, I think about your sales process, your sales methodology. Yep, you need them. They're big. but what is your win formula? And what are the things that need to happen, must happen? The meets minimum, 2 or 3 things in each sales stage that must happen. Instrument it, automate it, and inspect what you expect around that win formula and anchor on it. Selling is a bit formulaic, and a lot of sales teams skip some of the things that are critically important. You mentioned outreach. They're onto something there with the sequencing and the formula of engagement. It's equally applicable down market as it is up market. So the second thing I would say there, Scott, is it is a mixture of art and science, but really make sure you dial up the science part. A well-ran, growing sales team is one that is dialed in and measurable right down to the 10th or 100th of a decimal point around the metrics that matter. Makes sense? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Cool.
For sure. Absolutely. And I wanted to touch quickly on your first point, because I strongly agree with it. It's also just more rewarding as a seller to track the success of a customer longer and see the impact that you have on their organization, build real relationships. Like, those are things you're also going to take with you your next role or into your next, whatever it may be. It's like building those real foundations. Can you walk through some of the incentive structures that you adapted to make sure that people are focused not just on closing, but ensuring the long-term success? Because I think a lot of people are trying to figure this out right now.
Yeah. I don't know if we got it right. We made a big move recently to really put the emphasis here. First of all, I think this is mostly really applicable mid-market and enterprise. It can apply down market. Down market velocity selling, it's hard because of the volume and the speed. But for that segment where you've got customers that are going to grow, or that there's big upside in, this is applicable. Do your best to get, I'm a big believer in these two things. I talk about them all the time: functional purity and segment alignment. So the functional purity is your function, CS, sales engineers, ownership up and down, so you don't have a lot of ability for standard deviation of strategy and execution, meaning don't split it up between regions. And segment alignment, perfect alignment as best you can, right? It breaks at certain points. But one of the things when I first walked in here, I said, how many people are responsible for an enterprise number? The answer was 9. You can't have that. You have to have one person who owns that kind of enterprise piece. Same goes in CS and everything. The teams are perfectly aligned. So our accounts, our territories between the different functions are aligned. So then when they're aligned, you can have one side. The holy grail for any company is net retention, right? Mm-hmm. Gross retention is kind of a CS number. Net retention is a CS sales number, service SEs. So basically compensating around net retention. But the balance of the majority of your comp, where that is, it more on the retention side or on the growth side, depends on which role you're in. So then you find the right balances at 80-20, 70-30. But what we did is we played with the pay lines in each. So are they accelerating? Are the multipliers taking off at 30%, 40% attainment? What happens when they're at 100%? And we found a formula, we believe, that works for incentivizing the seller to care about retention, but also get the pay that they expect in the open market around growth. And the same for CSMs. We give them an outweighted success around retention, but we also pay them for growth as well. And I think it's going to be pretty good. We've already seen some really good traction where we experimented with it over the last year. I hope that makes sense.
It does. Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm with you. I think that bet is going to pay off in a big way. It's just everyone's aligned. Your incentives are aligned with your customer, your team. Like, it just makes sense. And I think we probably should have implemented that a long time ago in software as just like the industry standard.
We over-focused on sell.
Yeah.
Just go get new. Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah, we definitely got drunk on the net new logos. That's for sure. And it's hard to wean off that, but hopefully we're changing. Yeah. Final question. It's I call it the silver bullet question. There's no silver bullets in this game, unfortunately, but there are things that are actively working. And the question is, what is one go-to-market tactic or strategy that is working right now at Seismic?
Hands down, without a doubt, I call it the value continuum. We refer to it as the value continuum. Measure the outcome. Measure the outcome. So a lot of companies have business value engineers, business value consultants. They build the business case. The tactic is business value around the outcome for our customers is usually seen as a sales tactic. Buy from us and you will decrease onboarding by 25%. Cool. It's aligned with their what they want to do. When it goes to our services team to go implement or a partner to go implement, what are they measured on? Quick timed implementation, not running over, all these things that you might have within the SOW to protect the margin of your services business. The SOW and the approach must be focused on the use cases of our product within the customer that are aligned to that, ramp time more efficiently. So the setup, the implementation focus is there, and the all the implementation approach and use cases that we build with the customer are around that. And then our CSM, who doesn't just get the account once the implementation happened, has the instrumentation, the dashboarding, as well as a handshake agreement with the customer that we're going to measure during our quarterly reviews. We call them SBRs, strategic business reviews. We're going to measure it together. We're not just going to see that you're adopting and that consumption is happening. We want to make sure we're revisiting. Are we seeing an improvement in the metrics to which we agreed to when you bought this? It's the value continuum. That is the one tactic that I think is the most important for a business.
Yeah, I agree. We're seeing the same thing even with early stage companies right now. Is that how crucial it is? And I love the way you put it, the value continuum. I think we're almost getting towards a world in the not so distant future where it'll be like you'll have like not just QBRs where you're showcasing this value, like almost like real time value metrics like built into everything that we're using. I think that's coming pretty soon, which is a great shift.
I sure hope so. It'll make all of our jobs easier if we can have that transparency of success.
Totally. Well, Hayden, this has been awesome. Thank you for taking the time. I know you got in late last night, but you're such a pro. There were so many good takeaways in this. I imagine some listeners might be like, "Hey, I want to go work for this guy." Any big roles open at Seismic right now?
We do. We have slowed our pace of hiring. We want to be measured, keep our capacity aligned with our demand. But we have a couple senior roles open right now. I take a look at our website. They're definitely out there. And we're always hiring top talent. If you're good in financial services, excellent customer success, great sellers with a great story. And on our services side, our PMO, project management, is always something that's very important to us. But yeah, there's a couple of biggies that are open that are out there. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and we can connect.
Beautiful. Awesome. Well, thank you again, man. And for all of our listeners, I say it every week, listening's one thing, executing something totally different. Hopefully we gave you some ideas, tips, strategies that you can bring into your own business. And we'll see you all next week.